All right. So, what I wanted to talk about tonight is something you probably have noticed I have been doing recently, and Harrison actually too. Um, Through our studies with Dan Brown, and before I studied with Alan Wallace, besides all my Theravadan teachers like Jack Cornfield and Damaloka and many other teachers. So I wanted to talk a little bit. I found some interesting articles about how do these traditions, let's say mindfulness tradition, which comes more from the Theravadan corner, and non-duality or Advaita, which comes more from the Tibetan tradition or Hindu traditions. Ramana Maharshi, for example, and some other people talked about that. And those different traditions, the mindfulness tradition and the non dual traditions, were usually quite critical of each other. And I think that's why we haven't heard them much together, even though more and more spirit rock teachers, for example, having been sneaking out of spirit rock to some of the Tibetan masters. And so, but kind of more secretly. And so now it's becoming more, I guess, talked about. What is going on here? So, um, non dualists basically believe that we all have Buddha nature and that we all have the capacity for awakening in us, basically a priori, and that we have an ability to actually experience that. And the mindfulness teachers very often believe in very hard, continuous work over many decades. And so, in their extremes, they could look quite different. Like non duality often is associated with doing nothing schools of meditation, while mindfulness could seem at first sight quite effortful. And for example, the non dual schools, they talk about awakening or enlightenment quite freely, while in the mindfulness schools, it's basically not mentioned. You know, that's a great schools of understatement. And so at their extremes, those two different schools can be quite critical of each other. Some dualists think, non-dualists think that mindfulness meditators are caught in a trap of working hard to get somewhere and building up a meditator ego. And some mindfulness practitioners think that non dualists might be just kind of kidding themselves in how enlightened they are, and that they might be denying their foibles. And you know, I have to say, there are probably some truth to those criticisms. I have met some, you know, non dualist in the Hindu or in the Tibetan traditions where that might be true. There sometimes could be a little bit of smugness. And however, and what more and more people come to see now, that bringing those two traditions together and have them listen to each other without being just critical of each other can actually be incredibly fruitful. And I noticed that first just by experience. You know, I remember actually I seem to be falling into my practices without planning to fall into them. Like I remember with my practice 1980 with mindfulness. I hadn't actually planned to study mindfulness in Sri Lanka. I came there to study acupuncture and to get away from my family. And then I just kind of ran into this monastery one day when it was raining very hard, and rang the bell and met this amazing old monk, and had just this Dhammaloka who Jack Cornfield actually knew as a very famous monk, the head monk of Sri Lanka. But I didn't know this. I just basically, it was raining and I rang the bell and I was curious. And there I was. And then, sure enough, I ended in this monastery where I stayed for a few months until they kicked me out of the country. And so, and then, I basically studied with Alan Wallace, also just kind of out of, I needed CEUs for my psychology license. So again, it wasn't really masterminded. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. They're talking about the field of awareness. I wonder what that is. And then I started to actually feel it. And then I got, I went to Dharamsala because my 13-year-old was unruly and I wanted to travel with him and teach English to Tibetans. And then I realized, wow, they have something to them. They have some kind of, at their best, a lightness and a joy and a kind of a quality which I had missed a little bit in the Theravadins. And I became curious and I thought, wow, how can I get this? And so, how can I study some of what they know? And then I found a way to do this without decades of smells and bells, as it's called, where you have to work your way up through hierarchies and ranks and prostrations before you actually learn something. So, and then I dragged Harrison with me. And and so um, so the truth, however, is that many of these non-dual practices are not really against practice. It's like there are some very smug teachers say, oh, just be already there. But we all notice we have to work hard to work on our foibles, to work with our ignorance and anger um, and frustration and shame and guilt and whatever it is. And there are many aspects to mindfulness meditation that are very psychologically important. I think, just psychologically speaking, mindfulness is a very useful technique. I wanted to, maybe for the people who came in since then, just say that I'm giving a little talk on how the mindfulness traditions and the more non-dual traditions like Tibetan Buddhism and Ramana Maharshi and some of the Hindu traditions, how they actually work very well together, and how they, I might even say, benefit from each other. Maybe I might even see need each other. So many of the teachers like Ramana Maharshi and a lot of the Tibetan teachers like our teacher, Dan Brown, really teach very diligently how to concentrate, how to work with our emotions, on how to learn to be present in the moment. And so we notice that that is a necessity. However, there is also the transcending of our personal self, and a kind of resting in the field of awareness, which is also a wonderful contribution to spiritual experience. And on the other hand, it is true that many practitioners like myself, who have been for decades, sometimes years or decades, in the mindfulness traditions, in the Theravadan traditions, sometimes get a little stuck there. It's, as they say here, it's definitely helps psychologically speaking. And we know now that many kinds of psychology, like DBT and ACT and whatever it might be, are using quite a bit of mindfulness. But as a spiritual practice, where one wants to also kind of wake up to a degree spiritually, it can sometimes, one can get a little stuck. And there can be years or decades even where one feels, am I progressing really? Yes, we become more stable human beings. We are more morally astute, and we know ourselves. It's a wonderful adjunct to psychotherapy, but there isn't quite the transcendence piece. Unless we get into the really high practices in the Theravadan traditions, which are often not taught, at least here in the West. They are kept for the very special practitioners, which usually is not taught, let's say, in places like IMS or Spirit Rock. And so what is now proposed, that we bring these practices together, that mindfulness gives us a wonderful foundation to really learn about ourselves, to know that everything is changed, to notice the arising, abiding, and falling away of thoughts, feelings, ruminations, distractions, whatever it may be. But then we have to go a little bit beyond that. We have to go beyond the experience of our personal ego, and get more of a perspective of the non-dual aspect of reality that is also there. And that's, I hope you noticed, probably something I have been sneaking in more and more into our meditations. And so in that way, it actually fits really well together, because sometimes practitioners who basically stay for years and decades with the purely mindfulness practices sometimes feel they get a little stuck, or there is a certain sense of flatness. It's very diligent, but a little flatness. While what I noticed in the Tibetan practitioners when I was in Dharamsala is there was just this kind of joy in their face that I hadn't recognized before, and that can be there with those practices that help us to transcend into a place of where we feel interdependent with everything, where we transcend the separate self into into an interdependent, interconnected sense of awareness. And I think it's important to hold both. That's why it's non-dual. One could see as a wave, and the other one could see as the ocean. And both of them have water, water in common. But it's important to have access to both. And I might even say that I think that this is especially important in this time right now. I at least, maybe I shouldn't you know, I don't know if it's true for others too. I like to hear later. But I find this is an incredibly challenging time. And all the time I can really be pulled into my sense of worry, of sometimes despair, and whatever it is, frustration, and just really get dragged into the the mud of it all. And it helps me to know that to spiritual experience there's also another aspect, which is noticing that we are all interdependent, that actually everything in life is interdependent, and that we can rest in this field. And that's also true. It's not one true or the other, but it's also true. And having that experience is, I find, just very useful. Every morning I'll meditate for an hour in my backyard, and try to come to both of those, notice my worry, my frustration, whatever there is, my fear, but then also come to this place where I feel this other aspect of life. And I find it incredibly helpful. And it's very much like Jack Cornfield says, if we have the spoonful of water in a glass, it's very salty. But if you put the spoonful of salt into a glass, it's very salty. And when we put the spoonful of salt into a lake or even an ocean, it's still there, but it's not so salty. And so I think we all need these places where we anchor ourselves very deeply in the field. And one aspect of this experience of being in this great mystery or the field of awareness, or however we want to call it, God, or there are many names, is compassion, is love. So in a way, it's not a detached, aloof kind of thing. It's kind of a love that comes from a wider place. There is, according, I read this from the Dalai Lama, there's the compassion with a small c, which is hugely important when we think of, the children that are frustrated at home, the children at the border, the people that are locked in nursing homes, the firefighters that are completely exhausted, whoever it is. But then there is also this compassion with a big C, this, you might say, unconditional compassion, a compassion that is there because we feel deeply in our bodies that we are all kin, that we are all family, that we are all interconnected. And so maybe I'll guide you in a meditation that will, give you a little sense of that. And maybe then we could discuss it a little bit. And if there's some more time left, maybe there's a bit of time for compassion meditation. Make yourself comfortable. Let yourself settle into the sensations in your body. Let yourself feel your body. The touch between your body and the chair, your feet and the ground. And allow your whole body to be filled with presence. Notice what's going on in yourself right now, these days. Whether there's tightness or ache, lightness or heaviness. And gently, kindly be aware of your felt sense experience, always changing. And notice your body as a whole, the felt sense of your whole body experience. Feel your body, even with closer attention. Bringing awareness and body sensation together. And raise the intensity of your focus. Noticing every pixel or inch of your felt sense experience. And from this field of body awareness, notice breath arising with the in-breath, letting go with the out-breath. Feeling whole body awareness, breath brushing back in. And notice every instant of your in-breath in every instant of your out-breath. Falling back into body awareness. Being highly aware of every instant of your in-breath, every instant of your out-breath. And as you heighten your awareness, allow yourself to rest in awareness itself. Awareness that goes beyond the borders of your body. Awareness that fills the whole room and beyond. Limitless, boundless. Field of awareness. And from this perspective of awareness, notice breath arising with the in-breath, letting go with the out-breath, falling back into this field of awareness for the breath to come in gently again. From this perspective of the vast, unbounded, limitless field of awareness, within and around you, quiet, knowing, spacious. Notice breath arising ever so subtly with the in-breath, letting go with the out-breath, falling back into this field of awareness for breath to brush in naturally. And allow your body to be breathed. Surrender to breath breathing you. Always returning to the view of limitless, boundless awareness within and around you. Breath brushing through ever so gently. And as you hold this perspective of limitless, boundless awareness, you might notice breath arising out of this field and falling back into it. You might notice thoughts flitting through like rays of light, arising out of space and falling back into space. And breath again. You might notice feelings, emotions, like breathes in the vast space, or gusts of wind, arising out of space and falling back into it. Knowing that you're nothing and that you're everything. Part of everything alive. Noticing breath arising out of this field of awareness and falling back into it. Breath going all by itself. From this vast and limitless field, you might be aware of your own heart, your own humanity, your world, our world. Just be aware of what comes up. Keep holding this vast, limitless space. The space of knowing, of stillness, spaciousness and love. May the benefits of this meditation go out into the world and beyond. So, thank you for bearing with me. I was just wondering if there were questions or comments, and you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Radley. Yeah, I had a question about the Theravadan versus the Tibetan. Now, the Theravadan, is that considered to be Vietnamese, or, is it mainly associated with the location, or is it more of a tradition, or
It's a
both?
tradition that spans from Burma to Vietnam to Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And just different types of tradition developed.
Yeah. And I've been continuing on with my studies with Cynthia Bourgeot, and she talks quite a bit about non-duality as well.
Yeah, I know. And I think in every mystical tradition that's there.
Yeah, I was happy to hear you talk about the Hindu tradition versus the mindfulness tradition that's more tied to the universities and stuff like that in the neurology and psychology department versus the Hindu tradition, which would be more in the religious departments. And it's neat to see, them both coming together with that spiritual oneness idea versus just mindfulness awareness. It's more neurological or psychological, but with the more of a uh, theology component to it as well.
I love it. You know, there's a wonderful meditation teacher at Spirit Walk, Wes Nisker, who's also a stand-up comedian. And he said everything is everything and vice versa. So, you know, I think all these different separations that have kind of developed, they're man-made. You know, we all just try to grab the, what is that, the seven blind men and the elephant? Or women? Yeah.
I remember when we were doing the training program, you had a part about how do people deal with stress, stress in the professions that are dealing with people's mental health and people's physical health, doctors and therapists, and how do you deal with the stress of dealing with people that are falling apart and not fall apart yourself. And I know one component of it was having a spiritual life,
Yeah.
which is a little bit different than psychological and mindfulness, but this idea of having a spiritual connection.
And you know, mindfulness can be, at least, you know, Theo, you would know, in the jungles of Sri Lanka, or Harrison in the jungles of Burma. I know you spent a lot of time there. That's also very spiritual. You know, the way it's taught there isn't just cognitive behavioral. Would that be true, Theo and Harrison?
Yes, very much so. And but it is nice to hear that there's this sort of new spirit of dialogue that seems to be happening. I know that Dawa has said that he's interested in seeing this kind of a dialogue going on. I think the Garrison Institute has maybe hosted some conventions where people, Buddhists from various traditions get together and sort of trade notes and talk uh, and um, and I know Shinzen Young has also mentioned that he feels like a lot of the uh, spiritual masters of the various traditions haven't done a very good job of dialoguing and communicating. And but I find, I mean, just having studied with in the Theravada tradition and also then sort of starting this new course of study with Dan in this non-duality and field of awareness and emptiness practices, that they do seem to be nicely complementary in a lot of ways, that you can sort of tune into. I find that when I tune into the field of awareness and the emptiness of the phenomena that arise in that field, that it sometimes can make things seem sort of lighter and easier. You know, emotions and thoughts just seem sort of less serious and gripping, and you know, they're just kind of, as Shinzen says, you know, feather light and paper thin. These phenomena that are percolating within this field of awareness, and yet you can still pay attention within that field of awareness to all of the things that you can be mindful of in the Theravada traditions. So I like it. I like mixing it up a little bit and combining them and complementing them.
Totally.
Say Joni. I
Judy,
speak now.
you want to say something?
If you could just, for some of us, make it just a little bit more concrete, the dualism versus the non-dualism.
All right, okay. Harrison, you want to take a stab?
Yeah, maybe I'll try, and then you can see if I bungle it. Maybe that'll give you some ideas on how to answer it better. But you know, when I was training in the Theravada tradition, yeah, I didn't hear them speak too much about dualism. You know, it was more being mindful of different phenomena, different experiences. So it might be, you know, being very mindful of what you see, very mindful of what you hear, or very mindful of what you feel in the body. And so there's kind of an emphasis on just sensory experience of one kind or another. And then when I started to study in this non-dual tradition, they started to it was sort of a paradigm shift, and it was very disorienting at first, because you know, it started off sort of talking about being aware of awareness. So for example, if in the Theravada tradition, if you're focusing on the breath, then you're just aware of the, you know, sensations of the belly rising and falling. And then in this other non-dual tradition, they would talk about, like, okay, sort of tune into how you know that experience of the rising and falling of the belly, and notice that that there's an awareness of the rising and the falling that is a certain perspective, and so you can become aware of the awareness. And so I would start to say, okay, I'm aware that I'm aware of the breath, and it was hard to get a hang of it at first. It was like disorienting, and I was like, I don't know, this is weird. I'm confused. Am I doing it right? And then, but over time, I got a sense of it, that there was these two ways to look at the breath. One is like seeing the breath as just sort of focusing on the event of the breath, or the sensations of the breath. And then there was this other perspective of sort of this awareness of the awareness of the breath, and seeing it from the awareness perspective, that there's this field of awareness, and within it the breath and other things are percolating and manifesting like popcorn going off. And you can sort of see that breath from both perspectives too. And there's this kind of non-dualism where you're seeing it from the awareness perspective and from the event perspective.
Well, well done, Harrison. I knew you would. And well, it's kind of the both end, you know, phenomena and the field of awareness that's always there are in a way the same, even though they seem different. You know, and often the example that's used, Jack uses the example, it's like light that's both wave and particle. It's not wave or particle, it's both. You know, you look this way, it's a particle. You look that way, it's a wave. But Theo, you were about to say something, and I love to hear it.
Sadly, it wasn't so important. It was just a personal sort of reflection, because I came sort of from Theravada Buddhism, very practice orientated, and then also I come from a bit more psychology, which also likes the kind of firm, what we can actually measure and manipulate. Like if we have to take a non-dualist practice into the lab, it's just never going to work because we don't really know how to say what it is. So, you know, it's just been really helpful in a way, being exposed to these different ideas and traditions. And I think one of the ones that really gets lost for me, although it is in the Theravada tradition, is like loving kindness. I feel like it takes such a backseat in Theravada tradition because it's not so prominent, and I don't think people, it just is not so played up. So in a way, being exposed to the other tradition has been really helpful. And I guess the question that I had was, the one thing I never really know where to place Zen tradition and the teachings. I understand, because he seems very, very diligent in their practice, but then they also seem a bit more non-dualist. So I don't really, Zen practice has always been a bit.
I will answer this, and then I will end with a little tiny compassion meditation or loving kindness meditation, because now we did so much here. Let me see, they answered the Zen thing here in this article, so let me just find it, but maybe I'll just have to paraphrase. So they say actually the Zen is a non-dual tradition. It's a Mahayana tradition. They believe that all is kind of this field of awareness. But they say the way you experience it is by doing Zazen, just sitting. So they don't give you a particular practice like the mindfulness folks do. They just let you sit. I remember I actually started even way before, a little bit with Zen. You know, sit in front of the wall and just don't move. And if you do this long enough, you know, if you do that for 10,000s of hours, you actually get there too. But you have to sit a whole lot, which is great. Or I was wondering, here's Mary. I know, Mary, you are here, and you are a Zen practitioner. I don't know if you wanted to say something to that, because Zen is a non-dual tradition, but maybe Mary stepped away. I only see her black thing. Well,
I was going to say there's the Soto Zen where they just sitting. And then as I understand it, there's the Rinzai Zen where they have these other practices where they're focusing on the breath, or they're doing the koans and yeah.
Can you hear me, Radhule?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have this technology down that well yet. But yeah, I was.
Mary.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking of the Mahayana tradition, because I studied that for a long time, and I just kept having that, and it seems to me to be a combination of the both, you know. And I was trying to remember when I first started, there was a reading that fascinated me because it made no sense to me. I was actually going to, I will get it later and send it to you, but it's something about like, sort of like, what is the difference between these two things? And it's like, if there was even a hair's breadth difference between them, um, it would, I'm sorry, I can't recall it right now, but it's like, you know, if you keep talking, I'll go find it and come back in a minute. If not, I'll just send it to you.
Oh,
But
how about you bring it
I,
next Monday? We'll be all here.
I'll send a copy of it to you, the page, but I kept hearing it over and over again. And when I first started studying Zen, I remember reading this passage and thinking, this makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
Well,
And
no, maybe is it emptiness is form and form is emptiness?
no, it's what is the difference? That's how it started. I'll find it for you. But I remember I just decided I was going to keep reading it until it made sense to me. And I read it for like a year where I was practicing and sitting, you know, with a group and everything like that. And all of a sudden one day I had this epiphany, which I totally understood what it meant, but I couldn't define it any other way than it had been said, which obviously was not understandable without the experience of it. So I will send
Monday, Mary.
sorry. Okay. So I really, this was very interesting to me. I think in Zen it's kind of a combination of both, that you
Yeah.
it's kind of like with meditation in general, it's very simple really, but it takes a lot of practice to do it. And
Yeah.
it's a similar kind of a thing. I think we are always, we can always access that. It is our nature, our Buddha nature, but we sort of have to discipline ourselves to be in harmony with it.
Yeah, I think an metaphor they have is there's always the sky, but often the sky is hidden by clouds.
There you go. And I will find this passage and I will send it to you.
Okay, let's finish
All
with just 5 minutes of a
right.
little.
Bye. I will.
Oops, sorry. So let's finish with 5 minutes of metta, a loving kindness, compassion practice. Again, let yourself settle into the sensations in your body. Notice the touch between your body and the chair, the ground. Feel the whole felt sense of your body. And breath expanding with the in-breath, letting go with the out-breath. Feeling the sensations and movements of your natural breath. Breath breathing you. And notice breath arising out of this vast field of presence, of loving awareness, this boundless, limitless field within and around you. Breath arising with the in-breath, letting go with the out-breath. Surrender to breath breathing you. your mind's eye, notice what you're feeling right now or these days, what you're experiencing in your personal life. Your feelings, worries, thoughts. About our lives in community, in society, in the world, in our environment. Just feel all of that in your body. And hold yourself with kindness, with compassion. All your experiences, your sensitivity, your worries, concerns, your joys. You might say silently to yourself, may I be safe from inner and outer danger. May I be healthy in body, mind, heart, and soul. May I be gentle with myself when I feel vulnerable and scared. May I be free. Notice breath brushing through ever so gently. Then extend your well-wishing to all humans that feel the way you do, who might feel a sense of unease, of worry, of maybe even fear. Who may feel a bit out of balance, or very out of balance. And let's include all these humans close by and far away in our well-wishing. May we all be safe and protected. May we all be healthy and strong. May we all find meaning and purpose. May we all be free. Notice breath brushing through ever so gently. And extending your well-wishing to other than human beings. Animals, creatures, trees, rocks, plants, the earth, the waters, the skies. May we all realize that we are in it together. May we all realize that we need each other to survive. May we all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all find the support we need, and may life rise up to meet us all. May the benefits of this meditation go out into the world and beyond. Thanks for this lovely evening, the great discussion together, and see you
Right.
either Wednesday, Sunday, or Monday, or some other time.
Thank you, Radley.
Thank you, Radley.
Thanks,
Thank
Radhule.
you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you,
And
Radley.
Everyone.
Wednesday is solidarity and compassion will be really cool. Bye bye.
Hi.
Night,
Thank you.
Radley.
Thank you, Radley. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
Radhule.
Bye.
Thank you, Peggy.
Okay, thank you.
Good
I got on. Thank
night,
you.
Radley.
Bye. Thank you, Paulina.
Thank
Thanks for being
you.
the co-host.
Yes, of course.
The
Bye.
hostess.
So good to be with you again, Radhule. Thank you.
Bye. And see you. And Peter, so good to see you. You're doing good, Theo? He's gone. All right. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.